Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Steven Brown, and in today's video, guys, the trade deadline has come and gone, and now we shift our focus to the playoffs. So in today's video, here are my very early playoff lines. Now, you might feel a little bit different than I do in regards to a couple of things that are being shown here in my playoff lineup. By the way, let me know what you think the playoff lines should be before you watch the rest of this video, and then let me know if I've changed your mind on a couple of things. Now, I'm going to address the first thing there. Joe Thornton is not in my playoff lineup. There have been 14 forwards that have played a minimum of 5 games for the Toronto Maple Leafs since the beginning of March, and Joe Thornton has the lowest average game score out of all of them. I do not like him in the Maple Leafs' bottom 6, and I think that they have better options in their top 6, especially after acquiring a guy like Nick Foligno, who allows you to play Zach Hyman there more often. Out of the couple different line mates that Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner have had this year, because they've basically been stapled to each other the entire season, and they played ridiculously well together, they've had their most success with Zach Hyman in a fairly large sample size. And I also just want to say before I move on to my next line here that these are the lines most of the time. They can change situationally, right? If you're up by a couple of goals in the third period, you can take Zach Hyman off that line, put someone else with Matthews and Marner because those two guys are really good by themselves. Zach Hyman just makes them even better. And you can play Zach Hyman in a more defensive role if you needed to. Now, the second line I really struggled with because I think that Kerfoot on the fourth line for the majority of this season has been underutilized. He's a better playmaker than people want to give him credit for. He's a better goal scorer than people want to give him credit for. And he is a guy who's a decent skater. We've seen him on the penalty kill score a shorthanded goal on a breakaway. Now, if you're looking at last season, Kerfoot, Tavares, and Nylander were each other's most common line mates, and it was a decent line. They did control the majority of the expected goals. They did control the majority of the shot attempt share. They played well together. And going into this season, it's much of the same. When Kerfoot, Tavares, and Nylander are together, they do get positive results. But when we're looking at the Galchenyuk, Tavares, Nylander line, they've just scored more actual goals when they've been on the ice together. And if we're looking at the same sample that I showed when talking about Joe Thornton, Alex Galchenyuk has been the Maple Leafs' 6th most productive forward since the beginning of March in terms of average game score. He's played well. You can't take him off that line. Now, if you're looking at the third line with Foligno, Engvall, and Mikheyev there, Foligno, you can move up and down in the lineup as you see freely, but I think that he fits very well on that third line. The argument could be made to switch Foligno and Hyman later on in the game. You can reunite the Hem line, the Hyman, Engvall, and Mikheyev line to get that defensive stop. And if you wanted to flip Zach Hyman and Nick Foligno from the top 6 to the bottom 6 to get that Hem line or that shutdown line, you'd move Galchenyuk up with Matthews and Marner, and Foligno more than likely plays with Tavares and Nylander. Remember, you can always adjust things as the game goes on and what your needs are, depending on the score and how much time is left in the game. My original lines, which are on the screen right now, are just what I think they will do or what they should do most of the time. And if you're worried about Nick Foligno playing in the top 6 because of his advanced analytics offensively the last couple of years, I would say to kind of slow your roll in worrying about that. I mean, he more than likely doesn't really touch the puck very often on that line, and the one thing that Nick Foligno is good at and that you can't deny is that he is really good at going in there and getting the puck back when you don't have it. But you also have to remember that he's coming over from the Columbus Blue Jackets playing a defensive first role on a team who prioritizes defense and that has prioritized defense for a number of years and that has not been good offensively. If he's playing with Tavares and Nylander or in the top 6 at all, that'll be the best offensive opportunity that Nick Foligno has had in his career, probably period, but just to be kind to the Columbus Blue Jackets, probably in a very long time. Now, I said that we talk about Pierre Engvall, and we're going to. He's not a natural center iceman either. And that's where I think if Riley Nash is healthy, he might not be healthy by round 1, but maybe round 2 or round 3 if the Maple Leafs make it that far. Never mind, not if, when the Maple Leafs make it that far. I can see Riley Nash taking Pierre Engvall's spot in this lineup. Pierre Engvall is a guy that gets it out and gets it back and can also carry the puck a bit, but nothing else really happens when he's on the ice. Riley Nash may not carry the puck as effectively as a guy like Pierre Engvall, but that's okay because he's an awesome penalty killer. He gets it out of the zone just as well, and he does something that Engvall hasn't done very well this year, and that's stop other teams from gaining the Maple Leafs' blue line. Pierre Engvall's not a bad player. He's serviceable in that position for now, but I think that Riley Nash, if you really want to shut things down, is a better option on that line. And that fourth line is definitely not just whatever's left over. Jason Spezza has been an excellent point producer for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year in limited minutes. Wayne Simmonds, I really liked what I saw from him towards the beginning of the year at 5-on-5 in a sheltered role and even on the power play. He did admit that when he came back from injury, his wrist was still bugging him a little bit. He couldn't really shoot the puck as much. But as the season has progressed, I've watched his skating. His skating has gotten a lot better. This looks like a player who really just needs some time off and some TLC and to play on a team who can insulate him like the Toronto Maple Leafs. The power play is beyond me. Don't ask me about that. But if we can get that ferocity from Wayne Simmonds back, maybe if his wrist is no longer bothering him, he can shoot the puck a little bit better. If we can get that ferocity back from him, if we can get him staring down the entire bench after a fight saying, let's go, kind of thing, if we can get that back from him, he's going to be a key contributor to the bottom six. And on the power play, hopefully, when they fix whatever the hell is wrong with it. And really, all Kerfoot has to continue doing is being an effective penalty killer, and he needs to chip in a little bit more at 5-on-5. But the one thing that we noticed when we saw him come over from the Colorado Avalanche is that he is quite an effective player on the power play, and he's been underutilized here in Toronto, and rightfully so. I mean, the Maple Leafs opted last year to go with a loaded up number one power play unit, but this year they've looked for a more balanced approach, and I still don't feel that he's been used to his full potential on the power play. From 2016-17 to 2017-18, out of all the forwards who played at least a minimum of 100 minutes on the power play, Alexander Kerfoot is a 56th in terms of power play points per 60. It's in very, very limited minutes for whatever reason, but the minutes that Kerfoot has spent on the Maple Leafs' power play, it's made them a lot better, tremendously better than what they've been without it. There is absolutely no reason for him to be ninth among forwards in power play time on ice this year. And in terms of the defense, if you look at it, this is the best defensive core that the Leafs have had in the last 15 years. It is what it is. TJ Brody, awesome defensively. Jake Muzzin, awesome two-way defender. Justin Holl can be good, but is streaky. He can get cold at times. Morgan Rielly, I'm not even touching the 3-on-3 overtime from the Calgary game. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm just talking about even strength, 5-on-5, normal hockey, which is what we're going to see in the playoffs. Sometimes he just forgets where he is. But I promise you, the good does outweigh the bad with him. Hey, I don't know, crazy idea. Maybe the Maple Leafs should have gone out and gotten someone a little bit better than Ben Hutton in terms of defensive help at the deadline, because then maybe you could have inserted that person into the lineup and you could have used them in key situations later in the game. Let's say you're up by a goal or two. Maybe you don't have to watch Morgan Rielly defend a lead. Maybe you don't have to watch him play defense when it matters the most if they would have gone out there and acquired a different guy. I don't know. I don't know who was talking about that for the last month and a half, though. Now, to give Ben Hutton credit and the people who pointed out in the comments section, Kyle Dubas did mention in his post-trade deadline press conference that they tried to acquire Ben Hutton at last year's trade deadline, the 1920 deadline, but then the David Ayres thing happened, and they didn't end up acquiring anyone at the deadline, and he did have a really good season in LA that year. But the previous seasons were not very good. This season has been okay. Because what he is right now is a very solid number 6, number 7 guy. Not better than Travis Dermott, but a guy who is very, very good on the penalty kill. A guy who is very, very good at stopping up guys at his own defensive blue line, and that is valuable. If you were to see an injury to a penalty killer like a Jake Muzzin or a TJ Brody, Ben Hutton is insurance that way. But overall, he's not having the best of seasons. And as for the goalies, Jack Campbell, if he continues his magical Disney run, the Maple Leafs are going to be able to do a lot with good goaltending. And David Rittich, I owe him an apology. I'm sorry. He was great in that game against Calgary the other night. Not great. He didn't win them the game, but he was good. He kept them in it. I think the difference with this year's Leafs team heading into the playoffs versus the Leafs that we saw against the Blue Jackets is that this team is hungrier. And when you hear that, what does it mean when a team is hungry? It means that if they don't win the first battle, they're going to win the second. And if they don't win the second, they're going to win the third. The point is that they're going to keep trying, and they're going to keep trying. They don't quit. They don't quit. And if you haven't noticed that from watching the games this year, well, we're not watching the same games. And Nick Foligno, to me, adds to that. It adds to the identity of this team. And that's, they're not going to give up. They're not going to wear down. They will wear you down. And if Nick Foligno had to paint himself blue and run through a brick wall, I'm pretty sure he would. The same with Zach Hyman. A lot of people really wanted Taylor Hall at this year's deadline, and a lot of people really didn't want Taylor Hall at this year's deadline. It depends on who you ask. But it turns out the Maple Leafs didn't want him. And, you know, it doesn't matter, but it does. But it does. It really does. I talked about Wayne Simmons and his ferocity and them needing that back. In the first game of the season, him looking over at the bench and yelling at them, come on, let's go, come on. He was talking to the old Leafs, and the new Leafs, the Leafs of this year, came back and they won that game. They won that game. You know, if they could have gotten both Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno, I wouldn't have complained or scoffed at that either, and I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have either, but they didn't. For whatever reason, they decided they didn't want him. And that's not because he's a bad person. We need to stop that. I'm sure Taylor Hall can be a bit of a dumbass sometimes, and he would probably agree with me, but that doesn't mean that he's a bad person at his core. We need to stop that. But at the same time, you know, and for the people that are like, oh, what are the Leafs going to do? Acquire Taylor Hall and become more cursed? Come on. Come on. I originally shot this video a couple of days ago, so the standings are now updated, and I want to show the updated standings, but that's going to be it for this video, guys. Make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, remember, no contest. Am I worried about the Jets? No. No contest.